This episode of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast has been brought to you by our sponsors at Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is a PR collective that values people over profit. They put a different spin on public relations by working primarily with friends and using all profits to aid charitable organizations, with a roster that includes Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Brainiac, Get Some, Funeral Date, Damian Dunn, and many more artists, record labels, and podcasts. Sweet Cheetah! That's a great PR cohort. You can find them on social media by simply searching Sweet Cheetah PR, and they'll be there. He's been Tim, I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful.
If I'm the curse to win this, I would. If I could to win this, I would.
My name is Dick Chardonnay, and that's my bowling name. My name is Chris Newkirk.
Hello and welcome to a much delayed new edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter, and I am still here. And tonight, I have, as you just heard, Chris Newkirk of the Julies. We haven't heard from the Julies basically since the mid-90s, but they are back with a brand new album entitled Always and Always. This piece of music, this group of songs, are as much of a bygone era as they are of the now, marking a staggering rebirth of this very influential, long-lost dream pop favorite of mine. Do yourselves a favor, head on over to the Julies on Bandcamp, or over to their record label, Lost in Ohio, and pick this record up on beautiful pink vinyl. It'll be well worth the paltry $20-some you spend. Now, I realize everyone's been waiting for me for quite a while here. I was supposed to be on a brief little respite before I wrapped up this season, which ends in the next 2 weeks. But you know, that little virus that's been going around that everybody seems to have been getting for the past few years, well, it finally befell me and dropped me to my knees for about 2 weeks. I'm still not quite out of the woods yet, as they say, but well enough to release an episode or two. So without further ado, I give you Chris of the Julies on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast.
Symmetry isn't everything.
whatever else I bring to the table.
Wonderful. So I guess we can sort of start way back at the beginning. I started listening to the Julies in the early 90s. I had your demo.
Oh, you had the blue tape.
I had the blue tape.
How the hell did you get that?
Tape trading.
Oh,
Remember,
wow.
remember that? Remember the good old days of tape trading? But I didn't end up with a copy. I got the real deal.
Nice. Those were very, very limited.
From what I understand, yeah, that's true.
Wow.
And the person in question that I'd received it from was more into like the hardcore of the day. And it just so happened that I knew a bunch of those bands, and I had a bunch of I had a VOD Long Island demo that this person wanted, and they mentioned that they had the Julie's blue tape. I said, I'll take that and give you this. So it just so happened I had 4 other of those Vision of Disorder demos.
That's awesome. We are forever linked.
Yeah.
Vision of Disorder. And maybe there's more connective tissue than even that I don't know of, but that's enough for me.
Possibly.
Wow. Did you actually know about our band, or like what? I like that blue tape.
I'd heard just his explanation of it, and I was like, okay, sold. And as I said, I had a stockpile of these demos, so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll send one out to you. And I received that in return. And I was, being this person who's into hardcore and punk and indie rock, but is way into The Cure and way into Slow Dive and Swerve Driver and all of that.
Yeah,
it really spoke to me. But then, Love Life came out, and that sealed the deal in a very special way, because it was kind of culling from, all the indie rock and the quote unquote emo that was bubbling up, even though it fit in with it, but it didn't sound like it. But it was more leaning towards The Cure and post punk and dream pop, which was very, very much in my wheelhouse. So I've been, all that to say, I've been a long time fan. Very long-winded way to say it.
Outside of the people that were in our immediate sphere or worked in bars and clubs in New York and Philly, people didn't come to the blue tape first, the January EP. They called it the blue tape because that's what people started calling it.
Yeah.
The January EP, they got that well after having Love Life for years, when it finally started leaking. So people were like, oh, that's how they started. That's cool. But it wasn't like, this is cool. Oh, and this is really cool.
Yeah.
So, you did it in the proper order, I guess, if there is such a thing. And,
chronologically.
And, chronology is proper if nothing else, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I was running around New York at that time, too.
Ah.
So, I wasn't in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Right.
I left home pretty early on to go to school. I graduated high school early, so I went to college early.
Because of your amazing intellect?
Because I was, I don't know if I would consider it intellect in so much as a intense desire to get the fuck out of Pennsylvania.
All right.
So
I've heard that story before.
But I ended up back here. So that was probably a part of it too, getting a chance to actually see you guys in those days and take it all in. It was a big.
Oh, did you make it out to shows?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Which do you remember which?
I mean, we're talking the early 90s, and I was not straight edge. So a lot of those brain cells are currently in disuse, in disrepair, but I do have flyers.
Oh, no way.
So if I were to break into the archives, I could probably narrow down the exact dates and clubs. Wow. But I know I got to see you guys because I know I ended up with a T-shirt along the way.
Oh, wow. So is this in PA or
no, New York?
Ah, wow. That is good times. We played the Lower East Side almost exclusively back then. It was the 90s, and it was a string of venues CBGB and Brownies was, and Pyramid.
The Pyramid Club. That's where I saw you guys first.
That's it. So it's funny because the Blue Tape, January, the bartender there ran a club called the Bank, which was an old bank near Mercury Lounge, I think. And they had like a lot of goth shows and stuff.
It was just goth, yeah.
And he got the tape. They booked us at Pyramid and made sure he bartended that night. And so we played, the first time we played Pyramid, he was there attending bar, and he's just like, dudes, I love you, Dave. I love you, Dave. And I got you here tonight, and I wanted to check you out, and I love your show. And so I want to book, he booked us at the Bank. He booked us for goth night, which was awesome. And I mean, it was literally, I mean, we had gothic tendencies. We all, like, the bassist and I, John, listened to a lot of goth. I mean, I'm a huge Bauhaus fan.
Yeah.
A lot of goth bands from the 80s. But we didn't really play that kind of music, or, you know, it was influenced by that kind of music. But we were literally playing to people that had fangs, and their faces were all painted white and had capes. And they were all up against after like this first song, like halfway through, they all came up to the front of the stage. They were like reaching up at our feet. It wasn't a packed house either, so it wasn't like wall-to-wall people. So it felt very odd. It was just like a bunch of scattered people, like up at the front of the stage and like really into it and trying to touch us. But then how, you know, that went over kind of well. He got us into, along with our manager at the time, the New Music Seminar. We played at the Bank, opening up for Sponge. You remember Sponge? Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely.
So yeah, and the New Music Seminar was like the precursor to, you know, all the big, like the South by Southwest of the world, right?
Yeah, I have fond memories of the New Music Seminar.
Yeah,
and you would get such a strange array. Like, I remember I think it was the year you guys played it, that there was that white power band that was on HBO, Rahowa. Oh, they were on it after they stopped being Nazis, and they were playing like industrial folk music.
Oh yeah, that's good guys. There was an opening night. I'm pretty sure, it was New Music Seminar, and we ended up backstage with a band called Echo Belly from the UK and Oasis. It was our band and those two bands, and you know, everybody was like brand new at the time. Oasis was just had their singles out. Definitely Maybe came out maybe by then.
Yeah.
And then Echo Belly, and we got to be really good friends for a while with the drummer from Echo Belly, and we went to all the shows together. So we went and saw Oasis' first ever US show. I'm not an Oasis fan really, but it was kind of cool at the time because I was reading all the British music press, and they were everywhere. And then I remember like they were in Philly, and they recognized our drummer, and they brought him on the bus. They saw him at McDonald's. They brought him on the bus. I don't know. 1994. That's too long. Don't read 1994. So,
see, I got caught up in the whole Oasis thing in the 90s too. I fucking loved those first two records personally, but I was
they're still cool. I'm not a huge fan, but I mean, they're cool records.
Yeah, and if you think about their influences, it's kind of like in our wheelhouses, respectively. Like, you think like they were such huge, like, Smiths fans and Cure fans.
Stone Roses.
Big, and The Laws. I don't know if you remember the band The Laws.
I saw them live, dude, yeah.
Okay, I love The Laws.
I saw them at a place we used to play, the Fast Lane in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you knew Matt Pinfield at all.
Oh, yeah.
He and I were friends back then. He taught me to DJ. Taught me whatever. I had no idea. Like, one night he just said, "Hey, Newkirk, take over." And he disappeared. And he used to always disappear down the cellar. And I was like 22, kind of young and, 22, but naive. Grew up in an evangelical home, went to a religious college. I like to drink a lot. maybe smoked a little weed at that time, maybe not. I can't remember yet. But I didn't really know that he was going down there and just coking up.
Big time back in those days.
But that's how I learned to DJ. He just like threw me behind the console. He was actually supposed to produce January, that EP. He ended up, bless him, he's been sober for a few years now, completely. And he's worked hard at it. I know we keep in touch a little bit on the social. But he, 2 weeks before we were due to go in and record, he ended up in rehab, and he made all the arrangements. He booked the venue, and it was with a guy named Dance Guy, who was an early member of Bon Jovi. And this was like in central New Jersey, so not far from like Bon Jovi land.
Yeah.
I'm from Jersey, and our bassist was from South Jersey. I'm talking to you now from New Jersey. So we went in, and now we've got Nomad Pinfield and a guy that used to be in Bon Jovi and his engineer. And no one knew what the hell they were doing with a band like us. We were just into noise. And, in the end, the tape kind of sounded like no one knew what they like they didn't know what they were doing. But it was cool, and people liked it.
And it was analog, and that's
crazy.
That's the good thing about that recording, is it was an analog recording, was it not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that comes through. I understand your misgivings about the quality of it, not because it tonally suffers, but you could tell he scooped the mids or something.
They did not know what to do with all the layers of guitar, and then we had to do a quick mix. Like, we had enough money for a weekend. So when we were in that new music seminar, funny enough, they have all these different ways for bands to plug into different, seminars, I guess, little talks. And we went to this demo evaluation, and one of the guys evaluating the DIY recordings, the demos, I guess, like for us, it was a release and a demo both, was Hugo from Gang of Four. And he was doing a lot of the talking, and he goes, is there a song queued up that you want us to hear? And we put the song on, The Impossible. I don't know why we chose it, but we did. And there's this part, there's this middle eight break in there that comes on, or maybe it's just the chorus. Actually, the chorus comes on, and the guitars are just insane. Just insanely loud, over the top in the mix. And he does this sort of like spit, like he throws his chair back and makes this big gesture, like, what? And they were like, is that a good thing? And no, it's not a good thing, is it? And he gave us a little talking to after. He goes, I get what you guys are going for, but holy shit, man, it's too much. It doesn't sound good. Like, it's cool, but it doesn't sound good. And that's Gang of Four, and they're a noisy band. And he's telling me, because he was an A&R guy at that point for, I think, Quest Records. So we did our best when it got re-released. We actually went into a studio years later in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We just booked a random studio, and we tried to remix it, thinking that, hey, people like CDs now. Maybe we reissue it ourselves on CD. It was like 2000, early 2000s, right before everything went digital. Maybe it was, we were thinking in the digital sense at that point. I don't even remember what our thinking was, why we went and spent money on remixing this thing. And we didn't even really finish. But that was a starting place. We had these sort of remixes to then kind of get it mastered when Bill from Austin, Ohio came along to put the stuff out. So he was able to kind of in the mastering, kind of tamp down some of the crazy, intense sound. And we were able to in the remix as well. But long little tangent there, in that random Allentown studio we booked, there's all these pictures of The Cure from 1987 in the studio there.
Yeah.
I had no idea that we picked a studio, and we were crazy Cure heads and still kind of are. I am, and Alex is. We picked a studio that Cure stopped on mid-tour during the Kiss Me tour to do demos or they stopped on I'm not sure if it was the Ted on the Door tour, and they did demos for Kiss Me, or it was a Kiss Me tour and they did demos for Disintegration. One of those. I can't remember the pictures enough to be able to place his hairstyle to a year. Well, it just so happened like a beacon calling us, right? The Cure were here. The Cure were here.
Yeah.
That's where we went and remixed a little bit of January. So there you go.
That's amazing. There's something actually slightly, well, more than slightly mystical about Robert Smith in general. I look to him as almost this ethereal figure. Like he's almost not real. That's how good of a songwriter he is and how much presence he has. I just caught them on this recent tour.
Me too.
And I've seen The Cure many times from, the Disintegration tour onward.
Same. That was my first tour.
Mine too. And my fucking God, they're always great. Even if I don't love the album they're touring on, live, Same. They're always great.
Yeah.
I would like to say, in all honesty, that this tour is as good as when I saw them on the Disintegration tour.
I've been saying this to people too. This is my 20th Cure show, seeing them this time. I've been keeping count. This is good as Prairie Tour and the Wish Tour. And he sounded phenomenal. Yeah. And they sounded phenomenal. And I think also too, one of the things for me, Reeves, he's been sort of this like new addition for a while, and he's playing the parts. They kind of let him just go and do his thing this tour.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to hear them, even when they dropped the keys and they did just that 3-piece kind of thing for a while, and there were no keys. This was like the guitar onslaught of some of the songs that were in the set, like Burn and I did Deep Green Sea, maybe. I'm trying to think some of them, but certainly Burn. A few of the songs, like he was just not just playing the part on the record. He was interpreting the part on the record. He was doing his thing, and it was kind of badass in a way that was new for me to experience The Cure in that nuance, right? And I know, like I mentioned it to Alex, and Alex saw them a couple days after me. Alex is one of the guitar players in the Julies, and he was just like, oh my God, like he was like guitar god status that, and you don't think of The Cure in that way. And you don't think of Reeves as playing that part. And I've always found him sort of a troubling part to get me into the shows in this generation of the, Doctor Who or The Cure, like who was the cast, but then Robert just sounded like his voice I don't think has ever sounded as good as this. Maybe those tours I mentioned, from my estimation, I just like it sounded so good, and the fan reception made it even better.
Oh yeah,
they played like 6 or 7 songs that are unreleased, and the fans were into it. The casual fans, the diehard fans, they maybe saw them on YouTube, maybe didn't, but they were into it, and that's such a rarity for like an arena band, right? To have fans in rapt attention to an unreleased song.
Yeah.
You'd have to have gone and searched out on Google or be following Cure fan pages on Instagram.
Absolutely, because like normally that's around the time when you don't recognize a song, most people, that's when they, start fiddling around like, oh, let's go get a beer. Let's go do like,
yeah,
no, totally. Not this time.
I've been guilty of that for bands. Totally.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it sucks. And as I get older, I find myself not doing that quite as much because this might be my new favorite song in a year.
Yeah, me too.
But in my youth, especially going to hardcore shows, especially, it's like, oh, that's not a banger. Okay, I'm going to go over here and look at the merch table now. And there was none of that with this. I think that there's something really brewing with this generation of music fans too. These young kids, they're really cool. They like really good music again. It's incredible to me that post-punk has had such a resurgence.
It's insane.
It's massive now. And it was my dirty secret in the late 80s and early 90s because, in the circles I ran in, that's pussy music. Like, and?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely weirdo music, at least.
Yeah.
And you kind of, there was a uniform, and today, like, it's a different, it's the information age, if you will, the internet and social media, etc. Like, everything's homogenized, and that's cool. Everybody has access to every subculture, so there is no subculture. But when you were listening to bands like the Smiths, the Cure, and the Cocteau Twins, you wore black shoes that you probably got out of the thrift shop, or they were Docs.
Yep.
And you knew. I would know that someone like the Cure or the Smiths or both buy their shoes. Like,
Yep.
I just would know. There was a uniform, and it started there at the bottom, and that was how we knew we were all in the same cultural tribe together. And I'd be like in Jersey, I'd go on the boardwalk, and I'm there wearing my thrift shop black wingtips, and I'd see somebody else wearing some, and I'd be like, you're people I could hang with. You're a girl I might want to go out and date. I knew you and I can go sit in the beach, a bottle of wine, listen to Cocteau Twins, and whether you even talk to them or not, you just knew.
Yeah, and
talk to them. So
I find myself talking about this exact topic on this show quite a bit with people from our general age group, because that is dead now. In all reality, like, even something as glaring as, like, I'm wearing an Echo and the Bunnymen T-shirt.
Oh, I see the ocean rain right there at the top. Oh, I see.
If I were to be walking around, like, say, a mall in 1989, and someone's wearing this shirt, I immediately like that person.
Yeah.
They are of my ilk. Now I can see someone wearing this shirt and say, "Yo, dude, yeah, nice." And they'd probably be like, "Fuck you! Why are you talking to me?" And then keep going. That recognition of other in other people doesn't really mean anything anymore, and that's neither good nor bad.
True. I do think the shirts still get recognized. No, and certainly between Gen Xers, it's a thing. I make a point of saying, "Oh, that's a great Pixies shirt," or "Oh, I've never seen that Cure shirt."
Yeah.
I'll be that guy. But I go into my local cafes in Montclair, New Jersey, and the baristas see my Pinko Pick Cocteau Twins shirt, and they go, "Dude, I love that album." And I'm like, "What?" Okay, cool. I'm gonna wear it again tomorrow. I've been shocked at times. Now I've got some pretty cool music baristas in my neck of the woods. I mean, I get all sorts of, like, post-punk and shoegaze when I go into these places. So, hey.
It's great to me, though, that this generation is really, glomming onto that and making it their own. And there are new bands that are, injecting their own thing into it as well. But what a great time for you guys to kind of put your stamp on it and like, reemerge triumphantly. What was the kind of what happened during the lapse between Love Life and now?
Wow. So there's probably 5 different stories for the 5 original members there. But what happened, I mean, we ended up breaking up because we ended up recording this record that was taking forever to get released. And that was sort of we had major labels coming out to see us. We were doing these, like, festival, like, things, these seminar things, new music, and we were getting, like, a lot of great feedback from big labels, but they all said, "We want to hear the next thing you do." And so we signed this 1 EP deal. Like, label Flying Tart said, "Let's sign a 3-album deal," and we were like, "Let's do 1 EP deal because that's what we need to get to the major label." It's like Sire Records was interested at one point. They said, "We want to hear your next thing." We're like, "Sire Records? Are you kidding me? It's like the dream label. Like, Johnny Marr died to be on that label." And we were like, "Okay, so all right, let's just do this thing." And then it took forever. They went bankrupt. They finally released it. We were already broken up. Pat went on to play with some other bands. 2 of the guys were married, or maybe third was getting married or was married. Maybe three of them guys at that point already. Like three guys got married young in their 20s. And yeah, they just had to get on with life. We started another band called Riviera with four of the Julies, just without Pat, and my one of my roommates, Jimmy Williams, joined us for a bit. We played some shows, but again, like nothing was really. There was no real trajectory. It was like hanging on and writing these songs because that's sort of what we were all born to do. Then we went on and lived life. I stayed involved in music. I ended up writing a couple songs with a band called All Star United and got a publishing deal. I never really did much more with it than that. They asked me to kind of come down to Nashville and write some country and Christian rock, and I just didn't feel like that was a fit for me.
Yeah.
Young idealism, it's like, that's not my scene. I'm not going to do it. Right now, I'm like, I got a mortgage and a family to feed. I'll do that shit.
Yeah.
But then I ended up like just writing some songs. I had a friend named Ian McGlynn, a singer-songwriter, kind of in the Sufjan mold. We wrote a bunch of albums and songs together that are out there. And we wrote some songs for like commercials and some movies and stuff. But that was my musical venture that kind of kept me at least grounded. It was interesting too for me. I wrote the songs for him to perform. I was like the Bernie Taupin. He has a lovely voice, and he didn't need me to sing the song for him, but he needed help writing. He kind of was burnt out on writing. So it was really interesting because I'm used to singing my songs, and it's like writing these things that are so heartfelt and totally anonymously. Like you're just 8-point font, 8-point type on the back of a CD. It says your name, and that's it. But Alex never really. Alex, one of the guitarists, and John, bassist, didn't really play music at all. Post Julius and Riviera, I don't think. Maybe some fun stuff. I think maybe John may have played for a couple days in a church. Greg had some bands. The drummer had some bands afterwards, some indie rock bands that he played in. But he ended up moving to Seattle. But everybody just went on, got on with their lives. We all kept in touch as friends. It wasn't until Bill from Boston, Ohio reached out, and he had reached out years before. He reached out a second time talking about re-releasing it, reissuing it, and I wrote back, that sounds great, awesome. And and the next time he wrote me, I didn't even, I think, respond. I just left it there. I was like, this is not put in my headspace. But then he wrote back a couple years later and came out during the pandemic, and I was just like, why not? Anybody else for it? Like, anybody up for going around again? And Pat was like, I'm all in. And he sent me a bunch of demos and stuff he had written on his, iPhone and stuff, like just playing into the voice memos. And eventually Alex was like, me too. And the three of us, we had some participation from Greg for a while, but it was mainly the three of us, Alex and Patrick and I, just went forward. So, and it was a process because we did it all reunited on Zoom, basically, because it was a pandemic, and we all live in different towns. So that's a long answer to a very short, easy question.
Well, no, not really, because that's kind of what I was hunting for. And the next part of what I'm about to ask, I mean, it is intermingled with that. The sound of this new record is, I'm not going to say it's vastly different from your previous material, but to me, it sounds like you guys had always been playing together and matured and kind of metamorphosized together, and then finally released something all those years later, because the sound of this record is very fully realized and rich and more melodic, more tuneful, and more poppy in the best way possible. So the writing process, that was all remote as well.
Yeah. And it was a process. None of us, I'm a creative director, but I come from a writing background. All of it, not to say I wasn't especially tech savvy in making music on my laptop. I don't think any of us were. Some would argue that only Alex now is. It only takes one person to push it forward. So it was a really, really different process. And I would imagine that some of the reason this record sounds the way it does is we were just embarking on a very different way of making music together. In the Julies, we always had a rehearsal space, whether it was some storage unit, the college campus that we all met on, or John Beta's basement. We always had a place. And somebody would come in with a riff, or someone would just Greg would suddenly kick into a random beat and we play along, or John would have this bass line that he wouldn't say was an actual idea, but it was an idea. He would just start playing it and people would start maybe playing along. And you jam out something that sort of you carve out, you sculpt the song out of. Almost everything we ever released was made that way. But we couldn't do that. So now it was Alex or Patrick coming up with, initial idea to a song, and the other layering on, and then myself layering on, and then bringing it to a studio and then reinterpreting it there a little bit. So very different process. And also I would say too, like we went through a lot of different songs. My dog is making so much noise.
Yeah, I hear him.
I'm just gonna let him out. So this is not the whole. Goodbye. He doesn't even want to go out. Anyway, what was I saying?
Well, how do
you want me to leave?
When you finally got into the studio, that's where we were at.
So the original songs we started with were probably closer to what you would expect the Julies to make, except maybe lyrically, because it was a pandemic and it was a weird political landscape. There's a lot of like existential angst in the air, and I had no need to talk about unrequited love or exploring relationships from different angles because I'm married, and I am of a certain age where I see those things through different lenses, and so I was more influenced by artists like The Clash at the time, thinking like, they didn't get this pedestal and not use it. They turned the microphone into a megaphone, and I have to do the same thing. But the songs didn't really end up sounding that great. So they may never see the light of day. Maybe I'll recycle some lyrics, but they're also very of the time. Writing songs in 2020, in 2021 maybe. And I also think it's hard to write dream pop, if you will, if that's what we do, in post-punk, the kind of post-punk, dreamy post-punk, if you will, that doesn't talk about something reflective or inner monologue-y or something. Like the Cure, or like Robert Smith's a very political human being, but his songs don't go there.
No.
And I want my songs to go there a little bit, but they just have trouble when I get the palette, the canvas that Alex and Patrick create. I'm like, he starts singing the things I write, and I'm like, no, this is not gonna work, is it? But on the record, I think there's one song that really kind of goes there, and that's "Forever Machines." But that's the only one that made it across the finish line. And they were shocked when I first kind of like threw down the lyrics. They were like, I was not expecting that.
The lyrics to this record, though, they are very existential, very dark, without necessarily treading upon the same territories that you had in the past. I could tell you're, like shooting through a different lens, as you'd said.
Yeah.
Well, since you kind of had to put the kibosh on the more Joe Strummer of it all, and like name a really great political, like Bob Dylan of it
Yeah.
all. Where do you think this was all coming from? This new perspective you were bringing to the record?
Good call. I think the songs that ended up lyrically bubbling up were about the angst and dread and hope and fear of being part of a family, and also very much like, the Cure's new songs, though I'm a bit younger. I think most bands that are making music post 30s and out of their 30s write songs about mortality, because you are facing it in a different way. And I'm a parent now, and you just see things so differently. It's no longer like live fast, die young, or, whatever happens. It's like, I want to see as much as I can of these human beings. I want to see who they become, and I want to be there for them, and I want to soak up every minute of them. Oh, I'm so glad they're in school. But all the other minutes. But yeah, I don't want it to end. And I remember when we set this up, I watched some of your YouTubes, and you were asking like, what gives you existential dread?
Yeah.
And I was answering that question in my head. I'm like, being a parent in this political climate, being a parent in this climate, like, climate causes existential dread, not for me, but in the context of my loved ones, not of myself. And the dread is, at this stage in life, of my life at least, that dread is on behalf of my children. So for better or worse, I no longer struggle with the weight of existence. Like, when the Julie started, I was reading things like Camus and Sartre, asking, does it matter? Is there an eternal payoff, or indifferent blankness at the end? And, what does my, what is love and what is life? But I think life ultimately has just become, probably in a primal sense, about my loved ones. My angst now is for their future. Yeah. And I think probably that comes through a bit on the record. And then there's just some random smattering of stuff that has different angles. But I think if there is like a conceit to half the songs, it's probably that.
And then there's a kind of a flip side to that too, a yin to the yang, and like there's heaven is a dance floor, like something that is like almost you're letting the pressure off a little bit before you hit them with the next hammer, Yeah,
because I'm unpacking death in that one as well, but I'm not. There is no like, I'm going to miss you when I'm gone, or you're going to miss me when I'm gone, or like I don't want to go because you're going to be here. There's none of those thoughts about leaving a world I've built, a human world and family. It's more of, that song kind of hits on a few levels. One is like, I am still unpacking death. Like, I think we all as artists use music to unpack death a little bit. And that song does that. I'm also trying to unpack my relationship with the church and church dogma. Like, heaven is, I don't think any of us totally know what heaven is, and a lot of us don't know if there is. I'm not trying to prescribe any point of view. I'm just like, I grew up with a dogmatic idea of heaven, and it is really a place for white people to kind of hang out. And, and here's how you get there. And, and you do everything now because you're going to go there. And then also, I just spent so many years at like indie rock dance clubs, spinning music and dancing in New Jersey and New York. My wedding was that. That's like in the first few lyrics. It's like I will always remember dancing with a lot of my friends to our favorite songs with my wife, my new wife, and how awesome that was. So like that song has a lot of cutesy lines in there too, to bring that out, where song like this momentary bliss is a little bit more urgent about, mortality, where that one's like, hey, we're all gonna die, and maybe heaven isn't what you say it's gonna be. Maybe it's gonna be a dance floor. That's what's in my mind.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like my wedding night. We're all just gonna be dancing. Like, I don't know if that's true, but that's what I like to think, right? So,
Well, I mean, I'm of the mind, having been raised a dogmatic Catholic, that heaven is essentially what you want it to be. That's my idea of it anyway. A Zen, a oneness. I have my own whole take on spirituality, but basically what it breaks down to is we don't want to be lonely, right? That's the true dread, existential dread, is loneliness, being alone, being isolated, being without on the outside. Which leads me to believe that we're all God, because if we're separate, we're miserable, and we're attracted to being with one another. So eventually, since energy can neither be created nor destroyed, and eventually goes to ground, all of our energy coalesces somewhere together, and we become God again.
Well, there's a song for the next album right there.
There you go. You're welcome.
I think a lot of people at whatever level, with whatever nuance, have come to the conclusion that's, again, at some level, that human connection is divine. And whether you feel like that's of God or that is God, there is something about our experience here on Earth. And so maybe a Camus will be, of the mind where, what does it matter? It actually doesn't. It doesn't matter, So your life here, all the brilliance of our most forward thinkers in science and medicine, it doesn't even matter. And it may be him that said something wrong those lines, or it might be Jean-Paul, but I can't remember. But when you break it down like that, even on an existential nihilistic level, human connection matters. And if you take it to a spiritual level, human connection is divine. It's spiritual. I'm not prescribing anything beyond that of human connection, but without a doubt, I mean, that's how. If it's the God and Jesus of the Bible, and even if it's the evangelical interpretation of that, which I would have a hard time totally rationalizing, but there's something still in human connection being like one of the great purposes of God and of following God or knowing God.
Yeah, because fellowship is something that comes up constantly, and in every didactic form of Christianity, there's like fellowship together, union. The Eucharist is union, and the transubstantiation of body and blood into the host. I mean, it's all connection, right? That's our purpose on earth. Our purpose on earth is to be with each other and to find a way not to kill each other. And we still fuck it all the way up. But I'm trying. I'm not killing anyone, so I'm trying.
Yeah, and it goes back to, I think, not to bring it back to what Julie's song, but when writing Forever Machines, I think it's that frustration with a lot of evangelicals, and I don't want to throw them all under the bus. A lot of my friends from that world are still friends, and my family are still in that world, a lot of them. But there is this just palpable frustration in my life that even when it comes to killing children, that's not a bridge too far.
We're talking Abraham here, right?
Right. Oh my God, it's just a Sunday school lesson right now. It's out. But yeah, I don't want to go off on this tangent, but it really, and I get how they weigh it against an issue like abortion, and it's all. you know, I don't know if you ever followed Richard Rohr, and things aren't binary, and I get that, but and I live in that, and I embrace that, but I do think allowing school children to be in psychic torture, psychologically tortured and then killed, is a line that we could all agree shouldn't be crossed. And that military grade weapons is a line we agree shouldn't be crossed. There's no reason that anybody needs these. And I understand that everybody's in fear of some new world order revolution, and they're going to need these to fend us all off, because while we're not writing songs, we are still planning to take you over and eat your babies, and I don't know what else. Like, what are we supposed to do as people that maybe vote a little bit liberal? And again, I'm not trying to be especially political about this, but it's like, that's something we should all agree, no matter what side of the aisle you are. And that song just is full of that frustration. And again, it's not to throw every evangelical under the bus. And I think a lot of evangelicals might be somewhat, at least quietly, frustrated by it as well. And I hope, they can connect to that song as well and not be offended by it. But I don't care.
Nor should you, because, let's face it. If these people the evangelicals they're maddening to me for this reason. How can you, as a person who's supposed to be enlightened enough to have a personal relationship with your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, right? The Prince of Peace. But you own a fucking AR-15 and you're in a militia, and you got fucking C rations that'll last you 3 years and water and everything, and you're ready to kill.
That's the thing that gets me, is the ready to kill.
Yeah.
That's the thing I think that cuts me the hardest. I've seen friends post on social media, friends and acquaintances, like, I wish they would come here and try that. I've got this.
Yeah.
I'm like, in what world does that connect to your Christianity? And I know you through Christianity. I know you from my time in the church, and you're telling me that you want someone to either come try stealing your vehicle or coming through your door or whatever, so you can give your gun a little, test drive on their humanity. It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
And I was raised, I can speak to this with a great amount of authority. I was raised by a Vietnam veteran, a man who actually killed people, quote unquote, for this country, even though Vietnam was a fucking sham. But my father took human life. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you something. He wasn't proud of it. He wasn't okay with it, and it haunted him until the day he died of Agent Orange. So I'm going to tell any listeners who are evangelical Christians with their machine guns, listen, you may think you want to shoot someone in one of these imagined scenarios of someone breaking into your home, or try that in a small town bullshit that you're on. But in reality, you kill one person, you're fucked for the rest of your life, because that stain is on your soul, and not on a Christian level soul. It embeds itself in you and festers, and it never goes away, because you're going to see that person's face for the rest of your life. So think about that the next time you want to shine up your AR.
In your soul and haunt you, you may be a sociopath.
Yeah, exactly. And in that case, I don't want to know you anyway. And I'm not saying melt down everybody's guns. I mean, I own some handguns and rifles myself. I grew up in Pennsylvania, man. I'm a shit-kicking hillbilly at heart. But I don't have assault weapons in every room. I don't have this militia mentality. I live in a gun country, and unfortunately, these nuts have guns. So in case they come after me, I can maybe throw one their way while I'm running over this, bang bang, and scare them, so I don't have to engage anyone in combat. But is that ever going to really happen? No.
And I've had the same thoughts. Like, I'm I'm not like, first of all, to be clear, that's not an anti-gun song, and I don't know if I'm anti-gun or not. I am probably closer to being anti-gun than not. That said, I'm not thinking about banning guns.
Right.
I just feel like there's some obvious, right? There's some just obvious lines that we can all agree we don't cross together.
Yeah.
In the interest of a society that works, but I understand that there's power and there's need to retain power. There's need to create fear to retain power. There's need to create violence and chaos to retain power. All of these things, and I understand that. And I understand that I may be susceptible to things as well, where I'm buying into some sort of brainwash Kool-Aid as well, and maybe I might have some blind spots. I can say definitively that blind spot is not the AR-15,
Right.
and killing of mass peoples in grocery stores and schools. So and I'd say that in the end, it's probably one of the most existential, dread-causing recurring incidents of my life, and the thing that pisses me off probably the most out of anything in life, outside of maybe my last boss. So there's that. Yeah.
Well, because our kids right now their schools are locked down.
Oh, dude.
Like and with good reason, because this shit fucking happens. But when you and I were in high school in the 80s, we could just walk in and out. We were able to smoke. Remember that? But we were able to walk in and out of school, and anyone else could as well. Now you have a better chance of getting onto a military base than into a school.
Yeah,
that's great. But what's not great about it is the fact that our society and our governing bodies created a situation where people who are unhinged have free reign to get their hands on military grade weapons.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's not just
what the fuck.
It's hard to get a driver's license. Figure.
Conversely, in the 80s, it was harder to get a handgun than it is now.
Yep.
All you have to do is have the money and a quick little 2-second background check. You're walking out that day. There should be at least a cooling off period. What happened to the Brady bill? Remember that?
I do. Power of lobbyists, man. I mean, yeah. This is, dear listener, this is the best music talk you've ever heard. Post-punk on
music comes
American politics.
Music comes from politics. It comes from emotions. It comes from real life. So,
and that was really a line I was really trying to walk, and it's just so hard with dreamy music, man. Not to that far. And I got to tell you, back to the music side of it, like writing Forever Machines, and even though it's somewhat abstract, and I mean it's obvious, but it's abstract still. It's still lyrical. I had a lot of doubt writing it, because like, is this my place? Is this represent the band? Does this alienate some band that knew us in 1995 that's going to be like, wait, I thought you guys were different, and not like telling you just not to kill children. How dare you? I do understand their plight too. I understand the dilemma of someone that's gone that way. It's made the hard right turn where I've made a left turn, and I don't speak for all the band either. Like, I'm speaking for myself. When I write lyrics, I just do what you do. I'm not speaking for them, their points of view. They just accept that that's my role. I think the two bandmates that I'm currently making the music with right now, the music on this record, would have similar points of view. That doesn't mean all iterations of the Julies have or will have that point of view. And I know that's probably very much the case for the fan base. And again, like for me, this is a way to connect to them versus alienate them. Like music is like it's a liminal spiritual world we can all inhabit together, and I think we can hear things we sometimes normally aren't able to hear. And for me, one of the reasons I have the points of view I have today is because I was a fan of music.
Yep.
And I was a fan of the culture around it and the acceptance around it. And when it came time to really put like a pin in who I am, a lot of what I learned through the bands and the culture around music, whether it's a Joe Strummer or Robert Smith or a certain nightclub that was very welcoming to all people dancing on the floor, that stuff stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it's informed who I am, very much so. We're writing a new song. It's very much about that. I just like, I am who I am partly because I got into music. I got into a certain kind of music. I got into a culture, a subculture. And it taught me a lot about a diversity of thought and a diversity of lifestyle. And at the core, the commonality of our humanity and our spirituality wasn't different. It was just how we expressed ourselves. And you know, I locked eyes with so many people on so many dance floors, belting a chorus at the top of my lungs. Those people are part of who I am today in a weird way. And I'd say,
no, they are.
Yeah. Right.
So what does the, let me interject this.
Please.
Whenever you hear, and I see this a lot on social media, when people say musicians need to shut their mouths about politics, keep your politics out of your music, blah, 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 blah. They're obviously fucking morons because from time immemorial, protest has reared its head through music. New ideas, like all through music. That was how we communicated. That was the Morse code. That was how we projected these ideas, thoughts. The civil rights movement was spearheaded by song, man.
Mm-hmm.
The protest movement was spearheaded by song. Yeah. Phil Oakes to Bob Dylan to fucking like Jimi Hendrix to like you name it. To Joe Strummer to the Sex Pistols when they still had something to say that for that 15 minutes before they imploded. There was and Johnny Rotten became a right-leaning.
Oh my gosh. And that new album, the PIL, was so good. And then I hear some of the lyrics, I'm like, oh man.
Yep.
Well, that bass though, holy cow, the bass on that new record. I really struggle with
PIL is unimpeachable. They're unimpeachable. They're so fucking good.
So good. Oh, he's not to tangent off this, but he's a deceivingly good singer, I think.
He is. He's phenomenal.
I really think he's so talented, and his lyric writing too. And it kills me that like he's writing an anti-education song on this record, and I love the song. I'm like, oh man, wow, is this what people are going to fill out forever machines?
Let's bear this in mind, though. John Lydon is nothing if not a troll.
Yeah, and a good one,
a very good one. So,
his whole life,
it's very likely
the original.
He's the original, and it's very likely that he is just playing a game with everyone.
Who knows?
Because he's like, okay, what is punk now? As it was then, very, very left-leaning, very liberal.
Yeah.
How can I be arch right now? Let's do this. Let's ruffle these feathers. So it's inarguably
that's a plausible trajectory. I would say when you apply that to Morrissey, it feels very implausible.
Yeah. Well, Morrissey
started at a similar point, right? Like this sort of like anti-monarchist, all in a voice for this sexuality spectrum, and how it's sort of I think for a lot of the Smiths and Morrissey fans, it's like, how did we end up here?
I know, like this is the guy who I'm a vegetarian because of this guy.
Yeah, right.
Like he is ground zero for so much of the radical ideals that I adopted when I was fucking 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now.
No. It's your point though too about music being inherently political. I mean, art, right? Like, we don't all make music for capitalist purposes. I mean, the Julies didn't reunite to make money. The very thought of it makes me kind of chuckle. We will probably lose more money in reuniting than we'll ever make. Just in trying to make records that sound half decent, it'll cost us more than we'll ever make back. Especially not being a band that's going to probably tour on any extensive level. So it's for us. It's about making art, and I'm not saying it's high art, but it's for us. It's art, and I've seen the converse argued. Like, if you're not making art that's political, then it's not art.
Yeah. Yeah. I've believed the opposite for many years of my life. And just because you're not out there shaking a fist and being, explicitly political does not mean you're not being political.
Yeah.
As long as it's done with an intent and people understand that this is where I'm coming from. You can be Robert Smith and not sloganeer throughout lyrics. Mm-hmm. But if you stand for it and then you listen to the finished product, it starts to add up to people.
Mm-hmm.
But you have the advantage of having the ability to infiltrate then, because you're not being explicit about it. You're not sloganeering. So you can pull people in with, what's melodic about it and what's tuneful and what is catchy. And then they figure out what you're about. And then it becomes unimpeachable because you didn't ram it down their throats. You presented an option. Make sense?
The way you frame things.
That's my own, mode of thinking. But
no, but yeah, totally, totally valid and rational. God forbid.
But there's so you have one or two songs on a record that are explicitly that.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's a perfect amount. Because you're not the Clash. You're not against me. You're doing your thing.
We're REM.
Or REM.
I mean, REM, they were that kind of band. And I remember how, when he was up at the MIII live, it was a different story. He had things to say. And I, very vocal, and that threw me for a loop when I grew up in a Republican house, not knowing that there was really that much difference between one side or another. And then, growing up in a church, I just inherited that. And then I'm like, oh, he's talking about Republicans. He's talking about my parents. He's talking about me. Am I a Republican? I don't know. And I'm like a teenager, and I'm like, what's going on here? I'm like, maybe he should shut up and just sing about real, normal stuff. Maybe I'm that guy at that time. I don't know. But I remember having very confused feelings. That said, Robert Smith, we could call him Robert, right?
Yeah, he's our friend.
Podcast community, he's Robert to us.
Yeah.
He has a couple stickers on his guitar. That's all he does, right? Like, he needs that. And maybe if you follow his Twitter, you might hear some things. But I do think, can you just lean in on a couple songs? And we're trying to write another record, and I'm like, where are my opportunities to lean in to say the stuff I'm thinking about all day? Can I get that in a song that feels natural? And my example of Forever Machines is the only one I have, unfortunately. This song, the gravitas of it gave me license. Like, musically, there was such, for me, weight and power in it that I can talk about love. I can talk about life and in all of its existential way, or I can talk about something that's more concrete in my abstract way. That matches the power of the song, and it felt like a match. It was a hard match to follow through on, but it felt like I had license in that. I felt like I had to exercise it. So some of the earlier songs, like a song called American Gospel, was like talking about the new gospel of America. But the song felt very, compared to the stuff we ended up writing subsequently, it felt very kind of sophomoric, like maybe like an early Julie song from our original days. Like it was the equivalent of an early song. But it set me off trying to write like that and say some things. But it was only in one song that really, it all crystallized where the lyrics and the song all married themselves happily or sadly as the subject matter is. But yeah, I don't know. Enough of that song. Let's talk about something else.
Okay.
Something political. But I don't like that song anymore.
Well, just to put a fine point and end it here, someone who's come up a lot, Joe Strummer, said the personal is political. So there it is. So since we're moving onward,
and we don't have to, just from the song.
Right. We'll move on from the song, but musically, throughout the length and breadth of this record, it's also, as I stated before, very, very dissimilar and more nuanced than the earlier material. What changed for you as far as your listening habits that would have kind of, put a spell on you to want to change things up a little bit? Because obviously music has changed dramatically since we were in our teens and 20s.
A lot of that is the making of music has changed a lot too, right? So you had to go into a studio, you had to know the instruments you're playing and the players that were playing them.
Yeah.
Like to add synth to our sound is so simple. Like they can do it, the guys do it, the Pat and Alex do it via, they can do it through the software, they can do it with a simple, small keyboard attached as well. I also have friends that play keyboard. Ian McGlynn, my old co-writing partner and one of my best friends, he plays synths on like 7 songs on this, and on a song like Every Day is like Doomsday, he plays 12 synth tracks that are in there. And he plays a bunch on Angels in the Underground. On Forever Machines, he even plays synth bass. We actually decided that we opted into for a synth bass sound to give it sort of this ominous gothic vibe a little bit more. And the accessibility of knowing more musicians. You remember the days of being in a band in the 90s, like you were the outsider. Yep. Now you're an outsider if you're not a musician. Everyone's a fucking musician.
Everybody's a celebrity too.
Right? And it's awesome. I want my kids to be that if they can. Please. That said, it's just like I've got a lot of friends that could sit in. I've got friends that have bands that are successful, certainly more successful than ours. I can can you help? Can you want to play on this? Do you want to read? There's that, and then there's also there are subgenres to the subgenres to the genres that were subcultural genres that we were listening to. So there's post-punk that we all like. I grew. My bands were like The Cure, The Smiths, The Church, Cocteau Twins, Joy Division, New Order, Psychedelic Furs, Echo and the Bunnymen.
Yep.
There's so many subgenres to that alternative post-punk scene.
Dark wave, vapor wave, it
right?
It echoes outward, yeah.
And so I would say what's also evolved our sound is Pat was always really into dissonant indie rock. Like he likes stuff that's noisy and stuff that you play with someone. If you play it in the car with some family, they're gonna ask you to turn it off.
Like the cows and stuff like that.
It's not punk. It's like just really noisy indie rock. And he's really influenced by that. Where Alex so Pat got more into a lot of that, and Alex got more into a lot of synthwave and house and a lot of vaporwave. He's into bands like Time Cop, 1983, or is that Future Cop 19? I don't know which. There's a Future Cop and a Time Cop. I don't know which is which.
Yeah.
He's gotten to a lot of like real like producer music that's very, it's not a, what, you know, in 2004 there was electronica, and now 2023 there's that's not even a word we use. And he's really into a lot of that, like, you know, synth-based music, and house, where like, you know, the beat drops at a certain point, like everything, you know, gets sucked out and the beat drops and things come back in. I think, you know, that's given us a sense of how to like layer music and how to craft music in a way where it reflects our influences without like aligning with a sonic direction.
Yeah.
So it's still us. And then there's the fact that like we're not jamming it out in the basement like we were saying earlier. It's
Right.
We're passing tracks back and forth and we're layering things, and then we're experimenting more in the studio because we're grown-ups. And you know, Pat funded most of this. Shout out to Pat.
Yeah.
Not just for his guitar playing, but it gave us opportunity to sort of, we had a co-producer in Kyle from Headroom Studios, Kyle Pulley, who was in a band called Thin Lips, and his studio partner that they was in a band called, they were even bigger. I can't remember. And he's a real pop guy, but he's also a really thoughtful listener to music. He really pushed me. And he also just like threw down some like, this song needs a middle eight. It just does. Let's just write one right now. Come on. I want to hear, give me a minor key. Let's go with it. Just go off in the other room, write some lyrics. There's that. Like we got to like, there's a little bit more in his co-production. You know, there's a little bit more of a push. How about if we try doing this to the guitars, you know? And it gave us a little bit more latitude in our sound, where on Love Life, we had a weekend to make it. And Bill Campbell was the producer. He was in a band called The Throws. And he was like, I want to capture what you guys do. You're a live band. Let's make a live record. And then we'll do some overdubs. Like, and that's what it was. This was a little different than that. So I think there's that, but definitely the process of learning to pass tracks across, you know, back and forth digitally, and then talk about them in Zoom meetings every week, and sort of analyze them and assess them and fine tune them and optimize them. It's different. And I just do think a lot of it is the listening of music. We are all fans of music. You know, a lot of the bands I grew up with, like, we don't really listen to anything. We just make our music. We are fanboys. And we just suck the stuff up, and we're a fan of other bands as much as we're a fan of our own music, maybe even more so. And we let those influences trickle in, and we do the Bob Dylan thing of stealing. But we reinterpret things.
We all do it. We all do it.
Right?
If you're a musician, that's what you do.
I love that chord progression, or I love that sound, or whatever it is. And we've had decades of thoughts and ideas stocked up, probably. So, but yeah, I just think a lot of it is just having a different lens, and then writing a different way. And I think certainly not being in a room together live. We did that once. And none of those songs that we wrote in that live session ended up on the record. So that says something, probably.
So what I think I'd like to know really is what new bands have actually infiltrated your listening at this point. It's always interesting to me to, you know, hear the opinions of people in my age group about what is new that they like, because it's, as we age, it becomes more difficult for us to accept new bands for some reason. I kind of find that I'm sort of an exception to that, but only sort of, because 9 times out of 10, I'm hearkening back to something that was recorded in the 80s or 90s, just because that's when I was discovering the world.
Yeah, no, and the music that you discover in your teens and early 20s becomes the music.
Yeah.
Right. I think we would all have a different answer to that. And for me, a lot of it was like maybe the music I was listening to at the time, which I was into a band called Lanterns on the Lake. And they write gorgeous music. So there's that. It's kind of dreamy. But she also, the singer, she plays piano and guitar as well, I think. She wrote some great lyrics. So that was one of the bands for me. I've been into a band called the Marionettes.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, the name Mary, but they just sound like an 80s band.
Yeah, they do.
So there's that. Too. I still gravitate to bands that are like us, that are reinterpreting what they grew up with, giving it a new aesthetic spin and trying to personalize it as best they can, because they're artists and you can't help but to do that anyway. But I think a lot of what I end up gravitating to is like a band like the Marionettes. Mm-hmm. They have a song that sounds like The Cure. They have a song that sounds like the Smiths. But they also just all sound like the Marionettes. But beyond that, I'm really into songs. I think this generation is into songs more than they're into bands or albums.
Yeah, they're not album-oriented rock.
Yeah.
Not like we were.
So I like Wild Nothing, but I love a Wild Nothing song.
Yeah.
There's a song called Nocturne by Wild Nothing. Like, it floors me every time. But like, I'm not going to pay $100 to go see Wild Nothing live.
Right.
Like, and no offense to them, I don't expect people to pay $100 to see the Julies live. But that song just like smacks me across the head every time. I'm like, I want to write a song like that. You know? But I consume new music like crazy. I had gotten into a habit as a teenager that I have not dropped. It is just part of my operating system. As much as I listen to my favorite bands and artists, I have to funnel new music in because I never stopped doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to really turn it off. It's kind of like an OCD thing, and it's also like a coping mechanism, and it's certainly it's an operating system.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have over 7,000 pieces of vinyl if it weren't for the fact that I'm constantly on a mission of discovery.
Yeah,
that began with like early MTV and then college radio soon thereafter. But you know, like. There was always something next. There was always the new what's happening next. I remember, we both remember when hip hop fucking first happened.
Oh yeah.
Like we got to experience so many tectonic shifts. I don't know if there is another tectonic shift happening right now. If there is, I can't put my finger on it.
It feels very incremental, right? Not tectonic.
Yeah. There's no great thrust of what's next. I think the last time there was a movement that was a true movement that bubbled up out of nothing for me would have been like industrial music, because like there was that big emo wave, but none of it was emo in my opinion, because it didn't sound like Fugazi or Rites of Spring or any of the DC bands. So that's not emo. But what people called that, it was a regurgitation of something that happened before. I keep waiting for something really, really new to happen. And it's incremental. I wouldn't notice it if it happened at this point.
Well, I think I think there's just so many people making music. And there's just, it's all these sort of, it's a big gradient or how everything moves. And I don't know how, I think things have sonically, music making again is so accessible. I mean, what do you do? And, you know, you already had your John Cage and your Steve Reich, and you've had punk, and then the American punk, which is hip hop. I think like that is the same thing as the punk movement.
It is. Well, they're brother and sister. They're yeah.
And you listen to like British punk and maybe some New York punk, like, you know, think about the Ramones. Stooges, Detroit. Like you think of like American punk and English punk, and then to me, like there's the facsimile, the same sort of otherworldliness, excitement, something born of a condition, right? Like and an attitude. Hip hop is that, but what hip hop is now is, it's evolved so much. There's nothing punk about it. Just like there's nothing punk about punk music today. Like it's right. You're describing to an aesthetic maybe, but what is the disruptor? I don't know. To me, industrial makes sense. Shoegaze to me was like that. Like it was a soft disruption, I guess.
No, but it
carried in a way.
Like you can't. There's no denying that Slow Dive and My Bloody Valentine and Ride and Can were massively important, like phenomenally important. Why? Because invariably one of the biggest bands of the 90s was the Smashing Pumpkins, and guess who they were aping?
Yeah,
everybody I just mentioned. They were trying to be all of them, and Slint.
U2 was trying to be them. Octa, maybe a lot of people don't, because it's such a masterpiece of a record. People don't realize that's sort of them trying to catch up with the times. People were influenced by U2. We're now passing them by, and they're like, "Well, we need to use this wobble pedal. We need to put more effects on. We need to kind of like reestablish ourselves sonically."
And U2, like they were also like heavily into like Einstürzen and Newbot and things like that at the time. But if you want to talk about U2, now there's a band that's kind of responsible for a big part of who I am, because
likewise
their early stuff, Boy, I chronologically got into U2 because they were around since I was a baby pretty much, or close to it. But I liked them, and then I loved them, and then the Joshua Tree came out, and I couldn't not think about U2. They were like, the Joshua Tree was absolutely everything to me. That record was.
That's when I got into them, really. Like my musical world opened in '87. It was like Kiss Me and Joshua Tree.
Yep.
And then I went backwards because I was a hip hop kid. Like I was into Run DMC, Fat Boys, Houdini. Those were my
Sonic.
Everything, but and then I got into like dance music, like freestyle.
Oh yeah. And
then all of a sudden, like I heard The Cure New Order on an alternative radio station, thinking that was dance music. Like it's an amazing song. And then Erasure, and then The Cure, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me. This has all been leading up to this moment. But no doubt, U2 was a massive part of that, and they're one of those bands too where I have such visceral memories attached to their music.
Yep.
The War album, I remember. My brother, I bought a car, and it had this amazing stereo system, and I bought a system or something, I forget, and it had to be installed or fixed, and my brother was handy and I wasn't. And he was out there for hours, and he told me he couldn't fix it or get it going, get it working. And I was just pissed and depressed, and I was so sad. I can't drive a car and listen to music. I was supposed to go to a thing that night as a 17-year-old kid or whatever it was, and I was so upset. And then he's like, "Just go." My mom's like, "Go, just go to do your thing." Turned the car on, and the War cassette was in there, and he had got the stereo working. And War just starts blasting. I think it was maybe Seconds was on. I can't remember the song, but I think it was Seconds. And it was just, I'll never forget that moment. It was just that record, just new life was breathed into it. And it was such a vital record for me at the time. And I attach it to that moment, and I attach it to driving around in this red Ford Mustang, 1979 Mustang. I bought my own money. And my God. And being pumped and also cared for by my family, that like they worked hard to make it work for me, knowing that my life was about driving in a car and listening to my music.
Yep.
And that album was forever linked to that. And I have so many U2 memories. And I'm not a big fan these days, but I kind of, after Joshua Tree, I kind of like.
Me too.
I like songs, I like records. Octung Baby's a good record, but
it's great, but it's not.
When it came out, I was into The Cure. I was into My Bloody Valentine. I was into the bands that were just, to me, more important and expressive and interesting. I can look back now and sort of reassess my relationship with Octung Baby.
Yeah, me too. But like right after Octung Baby, I was like head first into like indie rock and hardcore. You know what I mean? Like it was Fugazi and Slint, and My Bloody Valentine, and all the aforementioned. But you know, the Joshua Tree is ground zero for so many people who are into alternative musics. It really opened the floodgates to what all of us would consider alternative music. Truly, it embodies all of that, but it brings it to an arena level, which makes it accessible and unique, especially with that production. You know, because look at who's involved there, and fuck, it's as close to a spiritual experience you can possibly get from listening to music than I've ever experienced personally. It's like a Eucharist. It's godly in its way. And they would love that because they're still Christians.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree, and I find also music in general, right? This is just it's sanctified space if you want it to be. I've, you know, as a person who's been in and out of church a lot of his life and grew up in it, and not having that as a part of my current life, music becomes that. It's a place for me, you know, to meet the divine. And I think for like, I don't know if you're into Sigur Rós, but I'm really into Sigur Rós.
I love Sigur Rós.
Yeah, and it's a place where I feel like, in Mushrooms, the last time I went with my brother to the show, I don't know if you saw this last tour with the orchestra. Yeah. I mean, I was weeping like a baby. And again, it's probably, I had some extra influence there. Brother had to took care of me. We just sat there and wept. But it was a very, very spiritual experience. And I was ushered into it via the music and beyond. But it was a place to really have existential answers. Spiritual dialogue without even thinking or speaking, or it was just happening.
And you're allowed to become a part of it without actually, you know, attempting anything. You just allow it to occur, and that's what's so magical about music. That's what's so magical about what you do. I mean, you talked about your wedding, vis-a-vis Heaven is a Dance Floor, and Wake Up Christine played at my wedding. I'm looking at my wedding's playlist. I'm looking at my wedding's playlist, and I was like, I know there was a Julie song, and it was Wake Up Christine. There's such a
Julie song didn't even play at my wedding, so.
But there's such a reciprocity to music via, you know, although I'm listening to it at my wedding, or go back to the 90s, I'm listening to it in my dorm room. You know, eventually I was going to end up running into you and doing this, because like we're all paying something into it. It's going to pay off somewhere, because that only makes sense. Call it fate, call it whatever you want. There is a reciprocity between the creator of music and those who are appreciators of said music, no matter how that quantifies, however it lines up. There's a give and a take to it. There's some whack jobs who are out there who loved my bands that I was in 25 years ago, who have a reverence for it that I can't possibly fathom. But I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like, why does this dick love my music? But you know, that's how this works. I
couldn't believe the fan mail we got we were a broken up band, and the mail just kept coming. My parents got phone calls of people trying to track us down to see if we were still a band and making music and what happened to us. And that so many years later, people are excited to hear what we're doing and making music, or even just to still spin this Love Life record. It also explains, like, I used to, maybe you're like me, I used to, like, you know, in the Cure in town, I saw the show, I used to try figuring out what hotel they were staying at as a kid. And there is that sense of, like, you belong to me.
Yeah.
We're in a reciprocal relationship, whether you know it or not.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, totally. And I do think musicians get it. I don't think they always are able to suffer it as often. Like somebody at that level, like a Robert Smith or Morrissey, you know, and those were heady times, the 80s and 90s, where it's like it was still iconoclastic, right? Like,
yeah,
the music was about the image, and you think of like new wave and alternative, like the posters were as important as the records.
Oh yeah.
And it was just like, it was a time of icons, and consequently, it's different than celebrity. It's not about wanting to get close to fame. It's about someone who represents you.
Yeah.
And you feel like you need to get close to them, and you need to express something to them. And I've met some of these people.
Yeah.
You know, after my teens and 20s, like thankfully I was in my 30s or 40s or something. I don't know. I got to sit down and have a conversation with Johnny Marr, and I didn't have to find him in a hotel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was nice.
Yeah,
but
especially since it's received a lot better too.
Yes, we had a beer. We were at a bar having a beer. And by the way, he is just a gentleman. A guy who I said my piece and I'm about to walk away, and he picks up on something I said and keeps the conversation going, and then I'm able to talk to him longer and have a more extensive and involved conversation. Just thank you for making the music, and this is what I did when I was in college, played it over and over again, this record at this time, and feeling like this. And I know you've heard this a million times. He's like, it never gets old. It's cool. I love that.
That's
but
great.
When we started talking about other records he played on, Billy Bragg, we were talking about a Billy Bragg song, another Bell song, and
I have such love and reverence for Billy Bragg. He's one of my heroes, legitimately my heroes, and his records with Johnny Marr playing just sonically resplendent, absolutely some of the most gorgeous, heartfelt music you will ever hear. And they're not on a Smiths record, but people don't know it. They don't pick up on it.
Same with the music, the stuff he did with the.
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
What he did with Modest Mouse.
Yeah. I know. And that's a lot of people. I'm a part of some of the Smiths fan groups and stuff on Facebook. And I end up sometimes actually looking at some of the posts, and there's these arguments about Morrissey or Marr, and people make the argument that Morrissey had this amazing, fruitful solo career. Well, Marr just went and played on some records, but like, he made that choice. He didn't care about being the icon at that time. He cared about making music he liked and participating in projects that fulfilled him, and probably just vibing with somebody that was at Morrissey. Like, no offense to Morrissey, I think they clearly had run their course, right? And he was enjoying that, and he was maybe enjoying time with Matt Johnson from the and Billy Bragg or Kirsty MacColl or Bernard Sumner. Like, totally, I get that. That's cool. I really love that he can be in the background too and be like, I can lean into my legend, or I can just follow what feels right,
And conversely, his solo album was fucking incredible.
Well, I mean, yeah, he's now making up for a lot of lost time.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah, I'm glad he's making music. There's some songs from his solo output that would rank kind of high for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But these hallmarks, these people that we both hold, we lionize, we hold them in such great esteem. For a lot of us, that's you guys. How does that, like as you said, you'd gotten all this fan mail and the like. What's it like shouldering that, being, in the age group we're in, and maybe not having the same amount of success, but for a select group of people having the same amount of impact? Do you feel any sort of responsibility coming into a new record?
Yes and no. So, the lack of obvious success and just small cult success definitely does add some perspective to, the weight. It doesn't feel like as much weight because, in terms of the means it's produced, it hasn't produced much. It's actually just been like a lot of goodwill and a surprising amount of interest, and it's humbling. There's that. In making a new record, I don't know. I think it's more a retroactive thing. I think in looking at it, you evaluate it like, will people like it like they've liked Love Life or Wake Up Christine? But in making it, it was more leveraging the goodwill. It's like, I at least know a few people are going to listen to this.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity to make art and know that it's not going out in ether. I have so many friends who make great music, but they don't have anything to build off of, and they're just putting it out there. And, none of the songs ever pass 1,000 on Spotify, so you never see a number.
Yeah.
And you just know it's not being heard. And I can relate. And I'm lucky enough to be in a position where a lot of our songs will get over 1,000. That's the magic number where you see a number. But I'm always surprised because the stories are so much bigger than the actual reality of the band. I mean, for us as a band, as cohorts together, making music, traveling to shows, putting hours and hours in, writing so many songs that have never been heard because they've never been captured. For us, it was epic, absolutely an adventure of a lifetime. But we're not oblivious as music fans to the landscape. We know that we are a small blip on a very big radar. So to hear the stories that people have been delivering throughout the years of, between records, of course, there's a flood of them now as a new record's coming out and, a majority of us have reunited. It's like, I'm getting an influx of this. It is, to be clear, very mind-blowing and very humbling. And it is satisfying. It is satisfying to have been at some level a small percentile of a Robert Smith or a Morrissey or whoever.
Yeah.
To be a, junior-sized version of that, very junior-sized, microscopic version of that. As somebody who responded and relied on the lyrical and musical output of these artists, whose course of my life was changed by discovering music in so many ways. I mean, my emotional quotient is evolved from music and from lyrics and artists and like that. And the actual course and plot points of my life have changed, right? And to know that a band like The Cure, can have done that, have been that sort of guidepost and put me on a pivot, what have you. To know that maybe on some much more diminished level we've done that is insanely satisfying and humbling. I mean, humbling is the biggest word. And I'm a writer. Like, through the course of my life, I have been a writer at some level. I've tried to write a lot of different things, and I continue to try to write different things. But to know that people are listening to some of the words, especially now, I mean, I'm vaguely embarrassed of a lot of my life lyrics and general lyrics, but they are in amber, and I accept that, and I also feel like that's me at that time, and I'm very happy to have that frozen in time, to know who I was, to look back on that. And also it's a point of connection with the rest of the world that has heard it. But now,
are you an English major? Is that what you went to school?
I minored in English lit.
Major English lit. That's what I have my degree in. Yeah.
Awesome. It's funny because I mean, you like me probably studied poetry and written a lot. And my poetry writing was, I definitely tried to keep along. I knew what music was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like the Cure and the Smiths.
Yeah.
Like your poetry can influence it, but your poetry itself, it's a different space. It's the New Yorker. That's the world that you're trying to live in, and it's not, the record store shelves. And I don't think, if at that time people read my poetry or then read my lyrics, I think this was the same person. There's been a lot more blending of voice in the subsequent years post Julie's. But even now, it's like, I don't need to write the most profound thing. I don't need to write the most poetic thing. I don't need to write to the height of my capability to write a song.
Right.
It just needs to feel right for the song. That's sort of the barometer where I think at one point, if I would have gotten back into music as the Julies, I would have put a lot of pressure on myself to write at a literary level, lyrically. I wrote so many sets of lyrics for, I mentioned Ian McGlynn, and some of those are super personal and super poetic, and maybe some of them are the best lyrics. And some of the unrecorded stuff, there's probably a couple of songs I would say are my best lyrics that he hasn't even recorded. And that wasn't even under my moniker of the Julies or Chris Newkirk. Again, it's like the 8-point font on the back of the CD or something. But, to be able to, again, take another stab as the Julies and know that people will listen and listen with a different mindset is really cool. But the writing journey itself is a weird part of that, knowing that people are going to listen. And again, the song that I will not mention again, tackling that, you become aware that people are going to be listening to your lyrics because they listened to them then.
Yeah.
So how are these songs going to be received, etc. So.
But we don't have any control over that, how they're received. It's all about how you feel in the intent and the execution. That's where the magic is. That's where the love is, truly.
It's like writing lyrics. If you've done it once, it becomes the process becomes a part of the birthing of something, right? It's like the making of music, and that's a cathartic experience. So it is, when you're writing a song and you're getting the words right, that's part of the birthing process. And that's naturally cathartic. And so, yeah, it's just as important. The process of writing them is just as important as the end product. And how people receive them, yeah, it doesn't matter as much. But when you have this entity, which is your band, right? And this, you've got the same thing. It's you kind of obsess on it a little bit, or you start thinking about it on the edge of sleep, and you start playing around with all the sort of amorphous possibilities and you're going, oh, I wonder how people will actually think about this song. You just,
Sure.
it's kind of the fun of it, right? Because you did that when you were first in a band at a more grandiose level. I wonder how the world will react to this. And it's this, you have visions of grandeur.
Oh, of course. And your Jesus Christ posed on stage.
Without a doubt. Now it's just more like that's a part of my understanding of being in a band and being a songwriter. And it trickles into those liminal moments of my life. And I do think about, I wonder how someone's going to react to this song. Or, oh, I wonder if they'll like this lyric. So now it's something. I wonder if my wife will hear this lyric, or I wonder if my 4-year-old son will grow up and understand this, like, or actually care or hate it or whatever. Will he get it? I don't know.
So, like me, you have a 4-year-old in our advanced ages.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Now, how do I put this? You're in the hospital. You're waiting for the baby to be born. I know exactly what my first thought was when my son was finally out, and it was vastly dissimilar from when my daughter came out of the womb, for sure, because I was in my 20s when my daughter was born. Being in my 40s and seeing this little one, there was an immediate different sort of connection there. What was your first reaction?
So I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I had them both later in life. Mm-hmm. They've come into my life much later than they would have on paper or should have on paper.
Right.
That said, it's a different world, and that's acceptable, and I love it. I am worn out, and the 4-year-old's going to wake me up at 5 tomorrow. I just know it, and it's a good thing I haven't refilled this bourbon. It's interesting because I think a lot of it in the birth of my oldest, it was just, there's so much connection, I think, for me with my wife in that. It's an amazing experience, and they do it all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have next to nothing to do with it. We donated some genetic material, and that's it.
And I can't help but think of that first, and just being the best support, the best partner you can be in that moment. But then there you are, and my oldest son is there, and it's instant unconditional love.
Yep.
Which is insanity. Like, you don't know that you hear about that, but until you experience it, it is a magical, abstract concept. And then all of a sudden you're in there, and it is a concept that feels so palpable, so tangible, so real that you're swimming in it. And my second came around, I was even older, and it was a very different experience. But for me, it was the holding of him and the smallness of him, and being able to just hold him on that first day and feeling all the human energy that I am projecting onto him.
Yeah.
Of, you might be like this, and you might be like this, and don't you worry, because I'm gonna be like this.
Mm-hmm.
I already had one, and it was living in the wonderment and hope, but also the promise. Like, I am your man forever, man. I am going to be that guy.
Yeah, because the first one I think is met with, as much as you fall to like easily and completely head over heels in love mm-hmm. with your first child, there's the trepidation of like, oh fuck, what am I going to do? Am I going to be good at this?
Yeah.
So you've had a proving ground, right? You have experience by the time the second one rolls around. Where when my daughter was born, I was incredibly unsure of myself. I was only 25 years old.
I can't imagine. Yeah, I was such an
scared. I was an asshole, and I was scared shitless. But here I am in my 40s, and just as you'd said, you're holding this child for the first time. That my wife had to have a C-section.
Yeah.
So they immediately take your shirt off, He needs skin to skin contact. We're
Yeah.
going to wrap you in a warm blanket. So I'm there with this little baby, and I'm not afraid to be a dad because I've been one for fucking half my life, man.
Yeah.
So I'm there holding this little thing, and I'm looking down, and I'm like, what you said, that's it, man. I'm going to be this. This is our relationship. This is what we're going to be forever. Anybody fucks with you, I'll kill them. Like,
That's it.
You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah,
it.
totally.
And that's what it is. But it doesn't take anything away from your first child because that's its own special experience. But that second one there's a self-assuredness built into the bravado of the psychic oration of this is what we are, this is what it is. I don't know. It's so unique, especially at our age, to be the dad of this little guy and waking up at all hours. And I think I'm more patient now. I'm a better father than I was in my 20s, hands down, for certain.
Well, I don't know. I'm probably less patient than I was pre-kids. I have no idea. My second one is a handful. It's funny because when that moment of looking down on him and all his helplessness, and not to get into details, he had a little stint in the NICU, and so you're thinking you immediately you leverage that to do some internal storytelling, and in my mind I saw him as like needing my strength and needing my support, and I created this sort of story and looking down at him that I laugh at every day now because that kid kicks my ass like every day.
Yeah.
No doubt he needs my support. He needs my strength, but in very different ways than I imagined. Like he is as strong as me at 4.
Yeah.
Like he is a machine. It's funny. And you know how the human mind just takes your sense of narrative, your prejudices, and your points of view, and wraps them up into this very convenient story that's going to be nothing like the reality, but everything like the reality. Because the reality is the subtext of that story, the conceit that's in that story is that I'll be there for you no matter who you are, and you're a handful. You motherfucker. You really are way too much, and I can't handle you, but I'll be there for that.
Yeah.
You know? So
it teaches you an awful lot about who you actually are, and
yes.
And not in like a movie kind of way, like, oh, I finally figured out who I am. No, you're really going to figure it the fuck out, because this kid's going to do things that would make you hate anybody else except this kid.
Yeah.
And that's really what love is, and that's beautiful. And it's crazy, and it hurts sometimes, but it's awesome.
Oh, it's all the things.
Mm-hmm.
All the things all the time.
That had to have an impact on this as well, because when you'd initially been in the band, there were no kids, there was none of this.
Yeah.
Now you're coming into an album 2 kids deep, at the age you're at, and having probably like 50 times the life experience than you had when you'd recorded the original.
Oh yeah.
And
that's why there's this vague embarrassment attached to the record, as much as there is some pride. And it's so funny. Love Life is sort of a semi-intentional exploration in relationships. I think, you're in your 20s, almost all your songs are about relationships, but there was more of a packaging of it, like, Drive Me Mad and Wake Up Christine, or these unrequited love songs. The Boy Wonder is love through the lens of self-absorption, I think. Blue is more of a third-person narrative about seeing beauty and experiencing a sense of love from an artist's point of view to a subject. And then Love Scene 17 sort of takes this theatrical look at it, more of a cinematic perspective on love. And then Friday and Faithless is more of like, that was the last song I needed to be written, and it was like more of about a God song. It's a relationship, like a human to God relationship song. It's a psalm, a psalm.
Yeah.
And so there's, you know, different perspectives on relationship, on love, and it, it may have felt somewhat profound at the time. I don't know. I can't remember. But I look back at it now and I'm like, yeah, you had no idea, you know? And really the idea of unrequited love right now sounds quite luxurious. It's like,
Yeah.
send me some unrequited love and just let me take a nap at it. That sounds like a really easy life. But then it was such a dramatic thing.
Oh, yeah.
We were all trying to find someone that we connected with, and when it didn't work, it just felt like everything
It was the end of the world.
chest, all at once. And I'm sure that can happen for Gen Xers still now in this day and age, but I can't imagine how exactly. I do think unrequited love is of a generation, not a generation, an era of your life, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you could have these hits of it later, but so much of music is about unrequited love, and there's two smack dab right in the beginning of that record.
But think about it, like a man in our age group who's unmarried or what have you, pining endlessly, poetry writing, pining over a woman who will never have him. What is that? That's fucking stalking, bro. How is it cool when we're kids? And
no, it feels like you couldn't write a song like that, put it out there without, I mean, if you're delivering it in an earnest way, without, I think, people needing to take the psychoanalysis lens to it.
Yeah.
So I can imagine writing a song like that intellectually for someone else to perform of a certain age group. Like, as a songwriter who's done a few ghostwriting things, like, I could sit down and write an unrequited love song as long as I didn't have to sing it.
Yeah.
And have it attached to me. As long as I didn't have to mean it. As long as it was like me tapping into a long ago memory and trying to manifest it into some clever wordplay for someone else to do. Sure, sign me up. How much is it worth? but it's not what I do now, and it's not gonna be. But I did. So a lot of the songs on this record are about, you know, domestic relationship, like my wife, my kids. But I've always tried to be enough. I tried to build enough flexibility, elasticity into the abstraction of the lyrics, and just enough like crypticism, like to give them life for whoever's listening to them. I want 18-year-olds to be able to listen to this record and listen to like Every Day is Like Doomsday without having to feel like it's them and their spouse in bed doom scrolling. They can have a partner that they feel doomsday-ish with. I mean, there's enough evidence of that.
Yeah.
And maybe even a weight of your hand is enough to find. Maybe there's enough there to find something besides, kind of blow the poetry out of the water a little bit with the family man line. But I don't know if you listen to Starflyer 59. That one for me had a little bit of that influence where he writes about being old. He writes about his dad dying. He writes about his family. And I was like, oh, maybe it is okay. At least with this group of fans.
Sure.
I could do that. And
that and Eels fans would be
out of that. Yeah. But maybe it will be one that, the 21-year-old skips over, and that's okay. Because the rest of it, I think, there's songs about like stuff that's happened to me and my wife in our house, and like things like that were big life events that probably feel very domestic if I actually told you the story. but they impact your life in such a way that they leave emotional scars or emotional annotations that you can't help but carry with you, like good or bad both. Probably good and bad both. But I hope that they're delivered in a way just enough that whoever you are, you're not sitting there trying to figure out the literal story. And then once you do, you're like, this isn't my life.
Right.
You know?
But I think as musicians, though, and as writers and poets, it's our job to be translators of emotion. No matter what the event is, we're translating the emotion to you.
Exactly.
We're transcribing it. We're emoting it to you, so that you can attach it to your experience. It has nothing to do with the actual story. That is probably the most prescient point that divides between the political and the personal, as far as music is concerned, because the personal, it reflects everything. Everyone has a stake in that. No matter what the truth of it is, the emotion anyone can recognize, and they could apply it to their own plight and carry that with them. And that's what makes music resonate. That's why there are songs that I heard in 1987 that will always be attached to a time and a date in my life, and they become autobiographical.
Oh yeah.
Why did the Julies end up in my wedding? Because it was actually a part of my college years, and a big part of my love life, and it was attached to a person then, and it becomes autobiographical by proxy, and that's the real beauty of music and
it's the soundtrack of your life phenomenon. I mean, it's just, that's what we do. We're constantly consuming music and selecting which, not consciously usually, sometimes consciously, but we are just intrinsically, subconsciously selecting those that will stay with us, whether it's incidental because of an event that's attached to it, or how much we listen to it, how much we resonate with it. But we are building the soundtracks of our lives. Now, there may be thousands and thousands and thousands of songs, but there's always those few dozen or few hundred that really tell the story.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most amazing things about modern music, is that there's enough of it and it's consumable enough, and it's made to be resonant that, like, we are all making this soundtrack. We are making our life's playlists, one giant mixtape that we're always going to have and hold and play and not tape over. Right?
Yeah.
And so much of it is it's like sense memory. It's, every spring I remember being a little leaguer.
Oh yeah.
There's something in the air. I flash back to being at Memorial Field in Cranford, New Jersey, playing Little League, going up to the snack stand after the game, whatever. It's in the air. It's instant. Driving, listening to a song, or hearing a song. I remember the windows down. I remember the smell coming through the window, and what degree of light or darkness there was in the sky. When I listened to Ride Nowhere, I remember driving on a country road in central Pennsylvania with the bassist John Beta of the Julies, listening to that record, and how visceral a moment it was. And I have so many memories attached to that record. That's one that always comes back. And another is, I think it was Dreams Burned Down, or A Different Place. I'll know it if I'm playing it because it'll take me there.
Yeah.
My first apartment, painting a bookshelf with my roommate Eric. And that song just hitting me in a way it didn't hit me before, and I will always remember that moment. Maybe it's because the smell of paint. I don't know.
Yeah, but
senses, right?
Think about this though. As I'm sure you are, I am a massive fan of the written word and of film. They're
Both.
big drivers in my life. Okay.
Yeah.
I met David Lynch. David Lynch is my idol.
Wow.
His movies, as much as I love them, will they transport me to the first time I watched them? Kind of, sure. The same thing with if I read anyone from Clive Barker to Nabokov, will transport me to the first time I read them, maybe. But they don't ingratiate themselves and attach themselves to sense memories and eras and specific moments the way music does. There's something universal and ubiquitous about music that does not occur with any other medium of art.
Oh, totally. I mean, film tries to deliver those senses, so you're not going to get them externally, and it also intentionally incorporates music to heighten the storytelling or whatever subtextual. If it's a Bergman film, it might not be, the storytelling. It might be something else, a philosophical point or an autobiographical wafting of memory. I don't know, but it employs music to pull you in, to keep you attached, to make those points. So what's that tell you about music? Music's so powerful, it needs it. Well, music delivers so much emotion in 3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It could be 1 minute, it could be 10 minutes, but on average, you're talking about your 3-minute song. It's like it impacts you on such a sensory level, at such a memory level, such an emotional level. It can be immediate in such a short amount of time, where film, it gives you moments of fear or sadness or joy, but it's a journey, and it's intended to be a journey, where a song just is a freaking bat to the forehead.
Yep.
Right? So a baseball bat, I've never ran into an actual bat.
A song is a tattoo. It is
Yeah.
it's not a Hallmark card. It's something that's meant to become an actual part of your system. And that's why I think someone like you is so fortunate to have, become a part of a zeitgeist, and to have a place in the hearts and minds of maybe not as many as Robert Smith, obviously, but that's nigh impossible to achieve. But the Julies have achieved enough notoriety and have amassed enough fans that this record's going to go somewhere. It's going to have an impact. It's going to have more than 1,000 listens on fucking Spotify. You're forever now. You are forever. You are now officially going to be heard well past your own lifespan, my own lifespan. My kid knows who the Julies are. He's 4. He listens to them. It's going to be a part of his life. This is going to be something that reverberates and spans time in a way that nothing else really will.
Funny that you say this. The actual title of the record is Always and Always, and it is quite intentional in that foreverness. And it was even, the joke was, for me, it's twice the foreverness, right? So it's just, of course, it's a romantic title that could be a Cure album title, and that was part of the idea. Phonetically and aesthetically, but it is for us like a chance to sort of poke at the divine a second time. And we always have felt our music, true or not, had a sort of timelessness or foreverness to it. And that was so an unspoken guidepost for us. And that's what drew us to music, and the music we're fans of, and it drew us to making music, is kind of creating this foreverness. It's not legacy. It's just something that feels like could be heard on your way to your heaven. Dance floor or otherwise. Like, it just feels, we wanted to make music that hinted at the divine, that hinted at otherworldliness, that hinted at timelessness. And that's where we had a bunch of working titles, but that one ended up rising to the surface. I think A, because it's aesthetically felt like kind of us, but B, that's the intent behind the music. That's the intent behind us making art, is to add to the canon of, Earth's, forever vault, if you will.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the macro incentive for us.
So I've had you for over 2 hours, and I'm not surprised. We do have a lot in common and a shorthand, but there's something more to that I think I'd like to kind of like ride this conversation out on.
Yeah,
is the fact that people who come from the music and the scenes and the culture that we come from we don't inhabit the same mind, but we have a similar mindset, being Gen Xers, being or having experienced music in the way we experienced it. It was always an event, right? It was a buzz bin thing on MTV. It was something that bubbled up from college radio and finally made its way to alternative rock radio, which didn't really truly exist when we were younger. But there were moments. What do you feel is the new buzzbin, the new alternative rock radio of this generation? What do you think is really moving the needle for these younger people, that they're finding and experiencing these things that we hunted for 30 years ago?
Well, I'm a Bandcamp fan.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't necessarily buy on Bandcamp. I listen on Bandcamp, and I hunt, or I am in these. I have this obscene luxury of having a lot of followers for my band that I can go and see what they're listening to.
Yeah, that's cool. That's
I
cool.
can go through their list and go, oh, all right, that's cool. It's a nice little experience. I do think they're positioned to exist as that, whether it's leveraged as that by the larger music listening community. I do feel it draws a lot of the oddballs that are looking for music that's not. There's no mainstream and there's no underground anymore, but
right.
But they are looking for something. They are looking for a very specific drug, and that is just the street corner to find it, I think. And I give them a lot of credit. And Joe Edward Keyes is the editor-in-chief, and he was a fan of our band in the 90s, which is unbelievable. And he's been a friend of the band since those days. And he wrote the liner notes in the Love Life reissue. He's part of a big part of Bandcamp. And he's got that mindset. And he also gives us that platform to be a part of that, to be found there. He and the Bandcamp team have championed our music consequently. I also think, just speaking realistically, Spotify editorial playlists are what people mostly use to find new music, and their algorithm, right? Algorithms are the new, record store, flip through the bins, etc. And that's fine. It's weird, but it's not weird. It makes complete rational sense. The discovery thrill is diminished, but discovery haul is higher. Right?
Yeah, the quotient is larger.
And so and the reality is the editorial playlists at Spotify are that's what a band wants, or to be on a TikTok, and that's what it's going to get you, followers or cash or what have you. More listens than breaking into the thousands. They can get you tens or hundreds of thousands. But again, it's a different visceral experience. It's not going to be like it was. There's not going to be rifling through the bins. It's not going to be buying a record because you like the cover art. It's not going to be, the recommend at your local record store. It's gonna Chris's pick, and there it is.
Yeah, yeah.
I always like Chris's pick. People bought off that. I bought off that in the past.
Of course, but like there's no Rolling Stone, there's no Spin. Like they still exist, but not to the degree that they had in the 90s when
There's
you would
not
read.
even a blogosphere anymore. It's gone. Like,
Yeah.
remember that in the 2000s? It's like
Strange-
blogs and pacemakers.
Strangely, what we're doing right now, right here, does move the needle slightly. The podcast, what I find where I find the most kinship with the younger generation is the fact that they want to know or be assured of the fact that the artists that they're listening to align with their belief systems to a degree. I mean, sure, they will consume what's popular, disposable, just as much as anyone else, and I'm as guilty of that as anyone else. But if you're going to find a favorite band or a band that you really care about, you want to know that the people involved in that music are people that you align with and have.
Yeah, that generation's like that with brands. I'm a creative director. I have to think about that all the time, right? Like,
Yeah.
brands try to reach a target audience, and shared values is a way to do that. And that's it's not especially new, but it's new from us in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
We didn't think about brands in that way. We didn't think about bands in that way.
Unless it was the United Colors of Benetton.
Yeah. I mean, there's an assumption then that all bands were left of center, or we didn't think about it because, it wasn't as divisive a world.
Yeah.
And, in the 80s, I was young enough to not think about Reaganism and Thatcherism at the level that Joe Strummer was thinking about it or Morrissey was thinking about it. It was an interesting cultural world I got to enter. Yes, Margaret Thatcher. Okay. But I didn't have to think about it or choose them as my soul fulfilling music because of it. It was more of a sonic aesthetic urgency, the lyrics that spoke to me emotionally. And then I started unpacking the politics,
Yep.
So, but yeah, again, like it's a different landscape. And what I love about, again, this multi-generation of listeners is that it's exactly that. It's like you talked about the United Colors. You made that reference. That illusion is a good description for the music listening community. I don't think they think so much in terms of a legacy band versus the yet another young 20-something making dream pop in their bedroom.
Yeah.
I don't think they need to distinguish so much. They're looking for music that speaks to them. And when I discovered the Beatles, they were a legacy band, but I knew I needed to dive in and explore who they were. But it felt like forever ago that they existed, which could be the argument for a band like mine. Were we forever ago for these people? I guess mathematically, maybe we were.
Mathematically,
right?
like the same amount of time between the Beatles and our generation. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're not considered like a dinosaur act or an act to be learned from, or we're just, I think for the most part, we're in the kettle of fish that people are pulling from. And personally, I'm content to be there. I think for those that want to dive into the DNA a little bit more, then there's a lot for them to pick through, and that's great. I want them to discover all the prismatic nuances of the Julies. But the reality is, like, they're gonna discover us on somebody's dream pop playlist or post-punk playlist and share it around, and we'll be right next to that band that's full of 25-year-olds, and that's where I'd like to be, personally. But I also want to be on next to the Chameleons, like on somebody's 80s playlist, So
I'll tell you what, that statement was a phenomenal way to kind of break this off, because that was like the ultimate kick in the face. But I really want to thank you for coming on, because like we went on for over 2 hours and it felt like 15 minutes. I don't often hit it off so well with someone that I could fritter away almost 3 hours and not feel bored or constrained to some sort of like hostage situation. This has been great. And
Right back at you. We were talking about the spiritual connection of, or the spiritual impact of, or gravitas of human connection. And I feel it's somewhat emblematic of that. And there's nothing like a free flowing organic conversation.
yeah,
There's just nothing like it. It is a true expression of oneself in community.
well, folks, that was Chris and I going on for about 2.5 hours, free flowing, free associating, discussing this gorgeous record, all of the time that passed between their last record and this one, life as fathers, as married men in this rarefied space that we both kind of inhabit. I love this man. I love this band. They've meant so much to me since I was a teenager. I'm so glad to have gotten the opportunity to bring this conversation to your ears. I really don't want to beat this point any further than I already have. He's been Chris of the Julies. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. And this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Please like, rate, subscribe, review, all that fun stuff. Good night, everybody.